Hi, my name is John Abercrombie, and I'd like to discuss with you some of my concepts and ideas for improvising, primarily in harmonic situations, standard type song progressions, more simple modal harmonies, and perhaps some of my own compositions or compositions that use what we refer to more as polychords, but basically primarily in a harmonic situation. And the first thing I'd like to discuss is a concept I use, which everyone uses, but I think of it in a particular way. And I think of intervals. I think of going from point A to point B. And further, of course, hopefully, when you're improvising. But instead of thinking of what most people do of scales and modes and thinking of this long 8-note scale and trying to, every time you see a chord symbol, trying to relate the scale to it, I think of, let's isolate a chord. Let's take a chord we want to get to know, or a sound, to become familiar with it. And one way is to just sort of deal with that isolated sound and not a progression. And think of intervals. By intervals, I mean from an A flat to a C, the interval of a third, a C to an E flat, or fifths. And for this purpose, I'd like to deal with a certain sound now, and helping me out in this quest for interval improvisation is my friend and colleague John Basili. He's going to be playing some chords for me. We're going to be doing some performances later on the tape, and he's also going to be quizzing me and asking me questions and try to trip me up and make this a more interesting tape. So what we're going to do now is take an isolated sound. We've chosen an old friend of mine, A flat major 7, flat 5, or for those of you who must know, it's A flat Lydian, or some people like to think of it as A flat 7 sharp 4 or sharp 11. It's a sound that I like to play over. And I'm just going to isolate this sound. We're going to play first out of tempo, rubato, no tempo. John's going to lay down this sound for me, and I'm just going to improvise over it using an intervallic concept. I'm not going to play scales. I'm not going to play hot licks. I'm going to play just intervals, which hopefully I'll be able to create little melodies from. And the intervals will be mixed. They'll be thirds, fourths, fifths, whatever I feel like. So. So that was a pretty simple, but pretty purely intervallic. I used mostly thirds, some fourths. Towards the end, I played some sixths, and I ended with an octave, which is an interval. So I tried to keep it very pure. If you look at this concept and take this concept a little bit further, instead of just going from point A to point B, in other words, 2 notes at a time, we can deal with note groupings, which could have as many notes as you want in it, but for our purposes, or my purposes to explain this to you right now, I'm thinking more in terms of 3-note groups, or triads. These triads can be very specific. They can be major, minor, or diminished, or augmented, but also they can be kind of non-chordal. That is, they can be built in fourths and not have a real triadic major-minor sound. They could be more like whatever, vaguer. There's something that would fit any situation. All purpose. And right now we'd like to play, John's going to play a pattern for me, which is A flat Lydian to G minor, like a bossa thing, you know. And I'm going to play in this triadic concept. More or less, that's the idea. That was sort of giving a little rhythm to it so that it's not all sort of floating. But this can also be practiced out of tempo too. The main idea behind a lot of the things I'm trying to get across in this video is to try and hear what you play. That's why I'm making it so simple in terms of intervals and triads. Because very often, like I say, we're dealing with scale. Every time you see a chord symbol, you see a scale. How can I get this scale in there? How can I fit all these things in? Well, you can't. There's no time.